The bridge was old enough to groan when the wind touched it. Wood slats, swollen from rain, held together by nails that had learned to rust with dignity. The river beneath was thin this time of year, clear and cold, whispering through rocks that had been there longer than the town itself. And beside it, the dog waited. He was a shepherd mix, thick-furred, dark around the muzzle, the kind of dog that used to belong to someone who worked with their hands. His name had been shouted once, every day, from the far side of the bridge. He knew that sound. He still listened for it. Now, there was only the river. The seasons had changed around him, but he stayed. Through rain, through frost, through the first snow that came too early, and the second that stayed too long. He knew every smell the wind carried: mud, fish, pine, and sometimes the faint ghost of soap and tobacco, from the man who used to come home by that path. He waited through all of it. People from town passed by sometimes. Kids on bikes, an old man who fed ducks with his granddaughter, a pair of joggers with neon shoes. They would see the dog and stop, smile, maybe whistle. He never came close. Someone had once left him a blanket. It was gray now, stiff from weather. He dragged it under the bridge when it rained, curled up on it until the world dried again. He wasn't starving. The butcher left scraps once a week. The postman threw him a biscuit when he drove by. But none of them were the one he was waiting for. The river never kept still. It was always talking, a language of repetition and change. He'd learned its rhythm, the way the current sighed against the rocks, the way wind made the reeds whisper. Sometimes, when it was very quiet, he thought he heard footsteps coming across the bridge. He'd lift his head, ears up, tail twitching once, then silence. Just the creak of wood and the soft rush of water. He'd lower his head again and wait. One evening in late October, the light died early. The hills turned the color of smoke, and the sky above the river held that thin, pink trace that comes before night swallows everything. The dog lay by the bridge, chin on his paws, half asleep. The cold hadn't yet set in, but it was close. He heard the sound first: tires on gravel, an engine cutting out, then voices, a woman and a boy. The boy was young, maybe 12, his laugh too loud for the quiet. The woman's voice was soft but tired, the kind of tired that lives deep. The boy saw the dog first. "Mom, there's a dog. Can we—" "No," she said quickly, then gentler. "No, honey. He's not lost. He's waiting." The boy frowned. "Waiting for what?" "For someone," she said, and her voice went smaller on that last word. The dog lifted his head as they passed. The woman smiled just a little, then turned away. When they were gone, he looked at the bridge again. The boards creaked. The air moved. The river kept speaking. He stood, stretched, and walked to the center of the bridge. His claws clicked on the wet wood. He looked down at the reflection, ripples of gold and gray, the faint ghost of his own face bending with the current. He leaned over and sniffed. The scent of the man was still there. Faint, like old smoke and work. Fainter every day. He whined once, low, and then sat. The sun slipped behind the hill, leaving the water dark. The dog stayed where he was, watching the far side of the bridge, the path that disappeared into the trees. He waited until the stars came, and even then he didn't move. By the time the first snow came, the river had grown louder. It no longer whispered. It spoke. The water ran high and fast, pale with silt, churning over the stones where summer had left shallow pools. The bridge shuddered with each gust of wind, its old boards swollen and slick. And still the dog waited. He had moved his nest, a torn blanket and some dry grass, farther under the bridge now, away from the cold breath of the river. His fur had thickened with winter, but the frost still clung to his whiskers when he woke each morning. The town had gone quiet too. The fields beyond the river were bare, the road empty, but for the postman's van and the occasional pickup that passed with headlights on in the middle of the day. The boy and the woman never came back. He didn't blame them. He didn't blame anyone. He just waited. One afternoon, when the sky hung low and gray, a snowstorm began without warning. Thick flakes, heavy as ash, falling straight down, silent, endless. The bridge creaked under their weight. The dog sat near the center, where the boards were driest, and watched the far bank vanish behind a white curtain. He knew this kind of silence. It wasn't peace. It was the kind that swallowed everything. Sound, scent, time. He stood, shook his coat, and crossed to the middle of the bridge. The river beneath was a ghost, only flashes of dark water where the snow hadn't covered it yet. He sniffed the air, and then, faintly, impossibly, he smelled it. Smoke. Soap. A trace of sweat and tobacco. His tail lifted, his ears perked. He turned toward the trees beyond the far bank, where the path disappeared. The snow was falling thicker now, but through it he thought he saw motion, a shape, a flicker of something human. He barked once, loud, hopeful. The sound echoed across the water, flat and sharp. No answer. He barked again. The shape didn't move. The wind shifted and the scent was gone. He whined once, a sound pulled from somewhere deep, and sat again. The snow piled up around him, soft and unfeeling. The bridge groaned. The river kept its rhythm. The shape in the distance, if it had ever been there, dissolved into white. That night the river began to rise. Snow melted where it touched the fast current, feeding it, darkening it. The ice cracked along the edges with a sound like splitting wood. Under the bridge, the water crept closer. The dog watched it, unmoving, as it inched up the stones, swallowed the roots, brushed against the blanket that had once been his bed. He stood and climbed the embankment, paws sinking into the half-frozen mud. At the top, the world was all white, the hills, the fields, even the trees heavy with snow. He looked back at the bridge. The river surged beneath it, restless and strong, carrying broken branches and foam. The boards shone slick and black against the snow. For the first time he hesitated. Something deep inside him, instinct older than memory, told him to go. To find higher ground, to leave the water to itself. But the bridge was home. The smell of his master still lived in its cracks, in the old iron nails, in the dirt where he used to sit and wait for the man to cross. So he stayed. He walked back to the center of the bridge and lay down, his body curved tight against the wind, snow gathering along his back until he looked like part of the structure itself, another piece of the world that refused to move. In town, lights flickered on. The storm deepened, the world shrank to the size of the bridge and the sound of the river beneath it. And though no one saw it that night, a single set of paw prints crossed the planks and stopped at the far end, where the path disappeared into trees. The snow covered them by morning. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet that follows loss. The river ran swollen and dark beneath the bridge, carrying the bones of winter. Broken branches, uprooted weeds, a single boot from some forgotten field. The ice had cracked apart days ago, but its sound still echoed up the valley like distant thunder. The snow had melted unevenly. The hills were patchy with mud and green. The air smelled of wet bark and rot. And near the bridge, there was only emptiness. When the sun rose that morning, a boy came down the road, the same one who'd passed months before with his mother. His name was Eli, and though he'd never told the dog his name, he'd remembered the animal's face all winter. He'd begged to come see if the dog was still there. His mother had hesitated, but spring does that to people. It tricks them into believing that what's lost might still be found. The road was rough with frost, the puddles thinly iced. The bridge looked smaller than he remembered, its railings twisted with vines washed down from the flood. "Mom!" he called as he ran ahead. "He's not here!" His mother caught up, breathless, her coat unzipped despite the chill. "Check under the bridge," she said softly. "Sometimes they hide." Eli crouched at the edge, peering down into the shadows. The water below was brown and fast, swirling around the stones. There was no movement, just a scrap of gray cloth caught on a branch, a piece of an old blanket, stiff with mud. He frowned. This was his, I think. His mother looked, said nothing. The boy tugged the fabric free. It tore easily. "Do you think he left?" he asked. She hesitated. "Maybe. Where would he go?" She didn't answer. She just knelt beside him, took the torn piece gently from his hands, and set it on the railing. The water below made a sound like breathing, Farther downstream, where the current slowed, a man in a pickup was checking the damage along the riverbank. His name was Harris, and he worked for the county road crew. He parked where the road dipped close to the water, boots sinking into the soft ground. The air was cool and smelled of clay. Something pale was caught in the reeds near the bend, a shape half submerged in shadow. He waded in. For a moment he thought it was driftwood, a log maybe, tangled with grass. But then he saw the shape of the muzzle, the familiar curve of fur gone stiff and dull from cold. The dog lay as if sleeping, one paw still outstretched, as though reaching for the bank. Harris stood for a long time, the water whispering around his boots. He'd seen things washed up before. Deer, trash, once a bicycle. But not this. There was something about the stillness of it that made him take off his hat. He bent, lifted the body from the reeds, carried it up to dry ground. The fur was heavy with river silt, the collar long gone. He set it down beneath a tree and looked toward the bridge, faintly visible through the morning mist upriver. "I guess you waited too long, huh?" he said quietly. Then, after a moment, "Still, you waited." By afternoon, the town had heard. Word moved the way it always did. Through the diner, the post office, whispered on porches. Someone said they buried him by the river, near the hill where the grass first turns green each spring. The butcher brought an old rope collar from a drawer behind his counter, just in case it was his. The postman came too, stood a little apart from the others. The boy and his mother watched from the road. They didn't say anything. When it was done, someone set a small wooden sign in the ground, just a piece of cedar with no words. The wind moved through the reeds and made the only sound there was. The river below ran slower now, carrying petals from trees that had just begun to bloom. And if you stood on the bridge in the quiet between gusts, you could still hear something under the water. Not a bark, not even a sound, just a rhythm that matched the flow. The kind of silence that remembers. By the fourth spring, the bridge had half sunk into the river's slow forgetting. The rails leaned outward, the planks were silver with rot, and moss crept across the nails, as if trying to hold them together. The current had calmed since the flood, but it still spoke in its own language, a low, endless murmur, like breath beneath wood. No one came often now. The road had shifted, rerouted after the storm, and only fishermen or wanderers passed this way. But the place wasn't empty. Not really. Something still lingered there. A warmth in the air near the bank, a rhythm in the water that seemed to rise and fall like the memory of footsteps. The boy, Eli, was older now, taller, quieter, the kind of age where silence fits easier on a person. He came back one afternoon, 4 years to the day since he'd last seen the dog alive. He didn't mean to mark the date. It just happened that way. He brought no flowers, no offerings, just himself. The river was low again, its stones showing through, green with spring moss. The grave by the hill still stood where they'd left it, the cedar sign weathered blank. Eli sat in the grass and looked at it for a long time. "Hey, old boy," he said at last. His voice cracked a little. "Didn't figure you'd still be here." The wind stirred, soft but certain. A single reed bent and tapped against the wood of the sign. He smiled. "Guess you are." Across the river on the far bank, something moved. A shape. Pale, low, hesitant. At first, Eli thought it was a trick of light, the shimmer of water playing against the reeds. But then it stepped out. A dog, smaller than the one before, with short tan fur and eyes the color of river clay. It stood still, watching him. For a moment, the world went quiet. No birds, no wind, no sound, but the hush of water between them. Eli didn't move. The dog tilted its head. Then it stepped onto the bridge. Its paws clicked softly on the old boards, careful, listening for what the wood might say. Halfway across, it stopped, nose lifting to the air. Eli could see the moment it caught the scent. Faint, old, but there. The ghost of a dog that had waited too long and left something behind. The newcomer sat down right there in the middle of the bridge, tail curled, ears forward. It didn't look afraid, just patient. Eli stood slowly, heart thudding. "Hey," he called softly. "You lost?" The dog's head tilted again, then back toward the far bank, toward the path through the trees where the old one had waited for so long. Then it looked back at Eli. He took a few steps forward. The boards creaked beneath his boots. The dog didn't move. The river flowed quietly beneath them, the same as always, carrying petals, twigs, the soft shimmer of sunlight. And beneath the sound of it, Eli thought he heard something else. Not quite water, not quite wind. A rhythm. Faint, steady, like paws on wood, like breath. He stopped walking. The sound stopped too. The new dog looked down between the planks, nose twitching as if hearing it too. Then it let out a single low whine, soft, questioning. The water seemed to rise slightly, brushing against the underside of the bridge with a slow, deliberate sigh. Eli closed his eyes. "You're still here," he whispered. When he opened them again, the dog was watching him with eyes that reflected the river's light, gold and shifting, alive. "Guess he taught you how to wait," Eli said quietly. The dog stood, turned once, and walked the rest of the way across. When it reached him, it stopped, close enough for him to see the pattern of mud on its fur. He knelt. "It's all right," he said, voice small. "You can stay." The dog pressed its nose to his hand, then sat beside him, looking down at the water as if it too were listening. The river murmured beneath them, the same sound that had been there through every season, through waiting and loss and return. But now it felt different. Not lonely, not heavy. Alive. The light shifted as clouds moved overhead. A breeze stirred the reeds, and for just a moment, the water's voice seemed to change, carrying the faint echo of a bark, distant but certain. Eli smiled. "Yeah," he said. "I heard it too." He stood, the dog rising with him. Together they walked down the bridge toward the far side, the boards creaking in a rhythm that felt almost familiar. Behind them, the river kept speaking. The sound of memory turned to movement, footsteps to water. And when the wind came through the valley again, it carried with it the scent of wet wood, old loyalty, and something that might have been peace,